My name is Wilma Jean Patterson, and I'm 52 years old. Right now, I'm sitting in my lawyer's office holding a check for $1.5 million from the state lottery. You'd think this would be the happiest moment of my life, and it was until my own brother and sister decided I was too crazy to handle my own money. There's something deeply wrong when your family suddenly becomes concerned about your mental health right after you become wealthy. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask where you're watching this from. Please hit that like button and subscribe, because this story about family greed will shock you. Let me take you back to the beginning to understand how I got to that lawyer's office in the first place. I've been working as a medical secretary at Riverside Dental Clinic for the past 8 years. It's honest work, but the pay barely covers my bills. I've been widowed for 5 years now since my husband Robert passed from a heart attack. The insurance money helped for a while, but raising my daughter Sarah on my own while she's in college has stretched every dollar I've ever earned. My little routine included buying 2 lottery tickets every Wednesday and Saturday. I always played the same numbers Sarah's birthday combined with the date Robert and I got married. 23, 15, 41, 7, 12, and 36. People at work used to tease me about it, calling it my widow's hope. I never minded their jokes because those numbers meant everything to me. My family situation was pretty typical for most Americans. My older brother Douglas is 55, works as a construction engineer, and lives about 20 minutes away with his wife Janet and their twin boys who just turned 16. Douglas always acted like the responsible older brother, constantly giving advice about money management and life decisions. My older sister Patricia is 57, works as a head nurse at General Hospital. Never married and doesn't have children. She's always been the practical one in our family, sometimes a little too practical for my taste. We weren't particularly close, but we maintained normal family relationships. We'd get together for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and birthday celebrations. Douglas would always bring Janet's famous casseroles, and Patricia would arrive with medical stories that made everyone uncomfortable during dinner. It was predictable, but comfortable. The night everything changed was a Wednesday in March. I had stopped at Murphy's Corner store on my way home from work to buy my regular tickets. Mrs. Chen behind the counter knew my numbers by heart and would start printing them as soon as she saw me walking through the door. That evening felt no different from any other. I got home around 6:30, heated up some leftover chicken and rice, and settled down to watch my evening shows. Sarah called around 8 to talk about her psychology finals, and we chatted for about 30 minutes. After she hung up, I remembered I hadn't checked my lottery numbers from Saturday's drawing. I pulled out my phone and opened the lottery app. My heart started pounding as I matched the first number, then the second, then the third. By the fourth number, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. All 6 numbers matched perfectly. The jackpot was $1.5 million. I must have checked those numbers 50 times that night. I called the lottery hotline 3 times to hear the winning numbers announced. I even drove to 3 different stores to buy newspapers and verify the printed results. Every source confirmed the same thing: I was the sole winner of $1.5 million. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay in bed making mental lists of everything I wanted to do with the money. First, I'd pay off the remaining $30,000 mortgage on my house. Second, I'd set aside enough money to cover Sarah's remaining college expenses and maybe graduate school. Third, I'd finally open the small bakery I'd been dreaming about since high school. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to the lottery headquarters downtown. The verification process took 3 hours, but it was official. After taxes, I'd receive approximately $900,000. They offered me the choice between annual payments over 20 years or a lump sum. I chose the lump sum because I wanted complete control over my financial future. Walking out of that building with the paperwork in my hands, I felt like I was floating. For the first time since Robert died, I could see a clear path forward that didn't involve constantly worrying about money. I decided to keep the news secret for a few days, while I figured out the smartest way to handle everything. The following Sunday, we had our monthly family dinner at Patricia's house. She lived in a modest two-bedroom townhouse that reflected her practical nursing background, everything clean, organized, and functional. Douglas arrived with Janet and the boys around 1 o'clock, carrying Janet's green bean casserole and complaining about traffic on Highway 12. I had spent the entire week rehearsing how I would share my news. During dessert seemed like the perfect moment. Patricia was serving her famous apple pie when I cleared my throat and announced that I had something important to tell everyone. "I won the lottery last Wednesday," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. $1.5 million. The initial reactions seemed genuinely happy. Douglas dropped his fork and let out a loud whistle. Patricia's eyes widened and she sat down heavily in her chair. Janet started asking rapid questions about where I bought the ticket and how I found out. The teenage boys suddenly became very interested in adult conversation. But within minutes, I noticed something that made my stomach feel uncomfortable. The questions started becoming more personal and probing. Douglas asked if I was sure I had read the numbers correctly. Patricia wanted to know if the stress of winning had affected my sleep or appetite. Janet wondered aloud whether sudden wealth might be overwhelming for someone in my situation. "What do you mean by my situation?" I asked Janet directly. "Oh, you know," she replied, glancing at Douglas. "Being on your own, having to make all these big decisions without Robert's guidance. It's a lot of pressure for anyone." Patricia nodded in agreement. Sudden financial windfalls can trigger all sorts of psychological responses. I've seen it in patients who receive large insurance settlements. The stress can manifest in various ways. Douglas leaned forward across the table. "Wilma, have you thought about getting professional advice on managing this kind of money? I know some financial advisors who specialize in helping people who aren't experienced with large investments." Something about the way he emphasized "aren't experienced" bothered me deeply. I had been managing my household finances perfectly well for 5 years. I had never missed a mortgage payment, never overdrafted my checking account, and never made impulsive purchases I couldn't afford. Sarah, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, caught my eye and raised her eyebrows slightly. She could sense the shift in atmosphere, too. After dinner, she pulled me aside in the kitchen while everyone else moved to the living room. "Mum, did that conversation seem weird to you?" she whispered while we loaded the dishwasher. "A little bit," I admitted. "But maybe they're just concerned about me having to handle such a big change." "It felt like they were questioning your judgment," Sarah said. "Like they think you're not smart enough to handle your own money." I hugged my daughter and told her not to worry, but her observation stuck with me during the drive home. The more I replayed the dinner conversation, the more uncomfortable I became with the underlying implications of my family's questions. Over the next week, I completed all the paperwork to claim my prize. I met with a tax accountant to understand my obligations and opened a new savings account at First National Bank. The bank manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, was extremely helpful in explaining different investment options that would provide steady, safe returns. I paid off my mortgage immediately, which eliminated my largest monthly expense. I transferred $50,000 into a dedicated account for Sarah's education expenses. The relief of being debt-free and knowing my daughter's future was secure felt better than any vacation or luxury purchase could have provided. But my happiness was dampened by increasingly frequent phone calls from Douglas and Patricia. They called separately, but their questions followed similar patterns. They wanted to know exactly how much money I had received, where I was keeping it, and what my plans were for spending it. Their concern seemed to intensify rather than decrease as time went on. 3 weeks after I received my lottery payment, Patricia called and suggested we have a family meeting to discuss some important matters. She said Douglas had some ideas that could help me make smart decisions about my new financial situation. The meeting was scheduled for the following Saturday afternoon at Patricia's house. I arrived at Patricia's townhouse at 2 o'clock, expecting a casual conversation over coffee. Instead, I walked into what felt like an ambush. Douglas and Janet were already there, along with a man in an expensive suit, who was introduced as Marcus Williams, the family's attorney. "Wilma, please sit down," Patricia said, gesturing to the chair across from the couch where everyone else was seated. The formal arrangement made me feel like I was facing a tribunal rather than talking with family members. Marcus Williams opened a leather briefcase and pulled out several documents. "Ms. Patterson, your brother and sister have asked me here today because they're concerned about your recent behavior and decision-making capacity." I felt my face flush with anger and confusion. "What are you talking about?" "What behavior?" Douglas leaned forward, speaking in the patronizing tone he used to use when we were children, and he thought I had done something wrong. "Wilma, we love you, but we've noticed some troubling patterns. Your gambling habit with those lottery tickets shows addictive behavior. You've been isolated since Robert died, which suggests depression. And now you're making major financial decisions without consulting anyone who has experience with money management." "Gambling habit?" I repeated, hardly believing what I was hearing. "I bought 2 lottery tickets a week. That's $4. Patricia joined in using her clinical nursing voice. "Addiction isn't about the amount of money spent. It's about compulsive behavior patterns. You played the same numbers every week for years, which shows obsessive thinking. Combined with your social isolation and the psychological stress of sudden wealth, we're worried about your mental state." Janet, who rarely spoke up in family discussions, added her perspective. "We're not trying to hurt your feelings, Wilma. We just think you need professional guidance to make sure you don't make any decisions you'll regret later." Marcus Williams spread the documents on Patricia's coffee table. "What your family is proposing is a conservatorship arrangement. This would place your assets under joint management with your siblings, ensuring that all major financial decisions are made with proper oversight and professional advice." The word conservatorship hit me like a physical blow. I knew enough about legal matters to understand what they were suggesting. They wanted to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could control my money. "You want to have me declared crazy?" I said, my voice rising. "You want to steal my money?" "Nobody's stealing anything," Douglas said firmly. "We're trying to protect you from yourself. Large amounts of money can be dangerous in the wrong hands." The wrong hands. I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against Patricia's hardwood floor. "These are my hands. I earned this money by working every day for 8 years and buying those tickets with my own money." Patricia tried to use a calming tone. "Wilma, please sit back down. We can discuss this rationally. Mental health challenges are nothing to be ashamed of. Getting help is the responsible thing to do." At that moment, Sarah walked through Patricia's front door. She had a key because she sometimes house-sat when Patricia travelled for nursing conferences. Sarah took one look at the scene and immediately understood what was happening. "What is this?" Sarah demanded, looking at the lawyer and the documents on the table. "Sarah, honey," Douglas began, "we're having an adult conversation about your mother's finances." "You mean you're trying to have my mother declared incompetent so you can steal her lottery money?" Sarah said with ice in her voice. "Mom told me she was worried about your questions and phone calls." Sarah turned to me. "Mom, you don't have to listen to this. Let's go home right now." I gathered my purse and jacket, my hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. "If you file any legal papers against me, I'll fight you with everything I have." Marcus Williams called after me as Sarah and I headed for the door. "Ms. Patterson, we're trying to help you. Think carefully about your response to our concerns." Sarah slammed Patricia's front door behind us with enough force to rattle the windows. During the drive back to my house, she helped me understand the full scope of what my brother and sister were attempting to do. The legal papers arrived by certified mail the following Tuesday. Douglas and Patricia had filed a petition with the county court requesting an emergency conservatorship based on my alleged mental incapacity. The document listed several concerning behaviors, including gambling addiction, social isolation, depression, following spousal loss, and impaired judgment regarding financial matters. Reading those words on official legal stationery made me feel physically sick. My own brother and sister were asking a judge to declare me mentally defective so they could control my money. The petition requested that all my assets be placed under joint management, pending a full psychological evaluation. I immediately called Elizabeth Rodriguez, an attorney who specialized in civil rights and elder abuse cases. Sarah had found her name through an online search and read dozens of positive reviews from clients who had fought similar family disputes. Elizabeth, who insisted I call her Liz, met with me that same afternoon. She was a sharp woman in her early 40s, with prematurely grey hair and an intense way of listening that made me feel like every word I said was important. "This type of case is becoming more common," Liz explained after reviewing the petition. "Family members see sudden wealth and convince themselves they're protecting their relative while actually trying to control valuable assets." She outlined the legal process we would face. Douglas and Patricia would have to prove their allegations in court. Meanwhile, I would need to demonstrate my mental competency and ability to manage my own affairs. The court would likely order psychological evaluations and interviews with people who knew me well. "The good news," Liz said, "is that the burden of proof is on them. They have to convince a judge that you're genuinely incapacitated. The bad news is that these cases can be expensive and emotionally devastating." Over the next 2 weeks, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. Douglas and Patricia had hired a private investigator who followed me to work, to the grocery store, and to Sarah's college campus when I visited her. They were documenting everything I did, looking for evidence to support their claims about my mental state. My co-workers at the dental clinic began acting strangely around me. I later learned that the investigator had contacted several of them, asking questions about my behavior and work performance. Some people became uncomfortable and started avoiding me during lunch breaks and office conversations. Sarah was dealing with her own harassment. Her uncle Douglas and Aunt Patricia kept calling her, trying to convince her that they were acting in my best interests. They suggested that I might need professional help, and that fighting the conservatorship would only make things worse for everyone. The preliminary court hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the petition was filed. Liz warned me that Douglas and Patricia would present their evidence first, and I needed to be prepared for some difficult accusations. The day of the hearing, I sat in the courtroom watching my brother and sister tell a judge that I was too mentally unstable to manage my own life. They had prepared a presentation that made my perfectly normal behavior sound pathological. Douglas testified that I had been obsessively playing the same lottery numbers for years, which he claimed demonstrated compulsive behavior. He said I had become increasingly isolated since Robert's death and had refused family offers to help with financial planning. Patricia presented her professional opinion as a registered nurse, that I was showing signs of clinical depression and poor judgment. She claimed I had been impulsive and defensive when they tried to discuss my financial situation. Marcus Williams presented documentation of my reckless financial decisions, including paying off my mortgage without consulting a financial advisor and opening new bank accounts without family input. Sitting there listening to them twist every normal aspect of my life into evidence of mental illness was one of the most humiliating experiences I had ever endured. But I was about to turn the tables on them in a way they never expected. During the weeks leading up to the court hearing, I had been working with Liz to build my defense case. But the most powerful piece of evidence came from something I had done instinctively during that awful family meeting at Patricia's house. When things started feeling uncomfortable during the meeting with Marcus Williams, I had quietly activated the voice recording app on my phone. I captured nearly 40 minutes of conversation, including Douglas and Patricia, discussing their real motivations for seeking the conservatorship. The recording clearly captured Douglas saying, "We need to make sure Wilma doesn't waste that money on stupid investments or give too much to Sarah's college fund." It also included Patricia's comment that a woman in her emotional state shouldn't be trusted with large financial decisions. A most damaging was a conversation between Douglas and Janet, where Douglas mentioned that winning the lottery would have been much better for the family if the money could be properly managed by people who understand investments. Liz had the recording professionally authenticated and transcribed. She also helped me gather additional evidence that demolished my siblings' claims about my mental state and financial competence. My family doctor, Dr. Stephen Martinez, provided a detailed report confirming that I had no history of mental health issues, depression, or cognitive problems. He had been treating me for routine medical care for over 6 years and could attest to my consistent mental clarity and responsible approach to healthcare decisions. My supervisor at the dental clinic, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, wrote a detailed letter describing my work performance as exemplary and noting that I had recently received a promotion and salary increase based on my reliability and competence. The manager at First National Bank, Mrs. Rodriguez, provided documentation showing that all my financial decisions since winning the lottery had been conservative and well planned. She noted that I had asked intelligent questions about investment options and had chosen safe, appropriate financial products. We also gathered character witnesses who could testify about my mental state and decision-making abilities. My neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, had known me for 10 years and could describe my responsible management of household affairs and my caring relationship with Sarah. Sarah herself was prepared to testify about her observations of the family meeting and her assessment of my mental clarity and parental competence. But the most powerful evidence came from additional research Liz conducted into Douglas and Patricia's financial situations and motivations. She discovered that Douglas was facing significant financial problems. His construction engineering firm had taken losses on 2 major projects, and he owed nearly $60,000 in business loans. His personal credit report showed missed payments and growing debt balances. Patricia's financial situation was more stable, but Liz found records of a previous legal dispute when Patricia had challenged our parents' will distribution 15 years earlier. Patricia had claimed that our father wasn't mentally competent when he made certain financial decisions that reduced her inheritance. Marcus Williams, the attorney my siblings had hired, had been disciplined twice by the State Bar Association for ethics violations related to conservatorship cases. One case involved a lawyer who had overcharged elderly clients, and another involved conflicts of interest in family financial disputes. The day of our response hearing, Liz presented our evidence systematically. First, she played key excerpts from my recording of the family meeting. The judge's expression changed noticeably when he heard Douglas and Patricia discussing their real motivations for seeking control over my money. Dr. Martinez testified that I showed no signs of mental illness or cognitive impairment. He described me as a responsible patient who made appropriate healthcare decisions and maintained good self-care practices. Dr. Walsh explained that my work performance had actually improved since winning the lottery because financial stress no longer affected my concentration. She noted that I had been trusted with increasing responsibilities and had never shown any signs of impaired judgment. Mrs. Rodriguez described my financial planning as remarkably sensible for someone who had never managed large assets before. She testified that I had asked appropriate questions and made conservative choices that protected my long-term financial security. Sarah's testimony was particularly powerful. She described the family meeting from her perspective and explained how Douglas and Patricia had been pressuring her to support their claims about my mental state. When Liz presented the evidence about Douglas's financial problems and Patricia's history of challenging family financial decisions, the judge began asking pointed questions about my siblings' motivations. "Mr. Patterson," the judge said to Douglas, "can you explain why your concern for your sister's mental health emerged immediately after she won a substantial amount of money?" Douglas stumbled through an unconvincing answer about timing being coincidental. "Ms. Patterson," the judge said to Patricia, "are you aware that your testimony about your sister's mental state contradicts the professional assessment provided by her physician?" Patricia tried to argue that her nursing background qualified her to make psychological assessments, but the judge was clearly unimpressed. After hearing all this evidence, the judge recessed for 30 minutes to review the case materials. When he returned, his decision was swift and decisive. "The petition for conservatorship is denied," he announced. "The evidence clearly shows that Ms. Wilma Patterson is fully competent to manage her own affairs. Furthermore, this court finds that the petition appears to have been motivated by financial interests rather than genuine concern for the respondent's welfare." The judge continued, "Ms. Patterson, you have every right to manage your lottery winnings as you see fit. The court finds no evidence whatsoever that you lack the mental capacity to make your own financial decisions." Sitting in that courtroom, hearing those words, was one of the most satisfying moments of my entire life. Justice had been served, and my brother and sister's greedy scheme had been completely exposed. The aftermath of the court decision created permanent changes in my family relationships. Douglas and Patricia were furious that their plan had failed, but they were even angrier that I had recorded their private conversation and used it as evidence against them. Douglas called me 3 days after the hearing, shouting into the phone that I had betrayed the family and destroyed relationships that could never be repaired. He seemed genuinely shocked that I had been smart enough to gather evidence and fight back effectively. Patricia took a different approach, trying to convince me that they had acted with good intentions and that I was overreacting to their reasonable concerns. She suggested that we could move past this misunderstanding and return to normal family relationships. I gave both of them a simple ultimatum. They could publicly acknowledge that they had been wrong about my mental state and apologize for trying to steal my money, or I would permanently cut them out of my life. I wasn't interested in pretending that nothing had happened or accepting half-hearted excuses for their behavior. Neither Douglas nor Patricia was willing to admit wrongdoing or apologize. They both chose silence over accountability, which told me everything I needed to know about their character and their true feelings about what they had done to me. Sarah was completely supportive of my decision to end relationships with her uncle and aunt. She had been disgusted by their behavior during the entire ordeal and felt that they had revealed their true nature. "Mum," she said, "people who try to have you declared crazy to steal your money aren't family. They're just relatives." With the legal battle behind me, I was finally free to enjoy my lottery winnings and pursue my long-delayed dreams. The first thing I did was open Sweet Victory Bakery in a small shopping center about 2 miles from my house. The bakery had been my dream since high school, but life circumstances had never allowed me to pursue it seriously. Now I had the financial security to take reasonable risks and follow my passion. I spent 2 months renovating the space, installing commercial ovens and display cases, and creating a warm, welcoming atmosphere with comfortable seating and local artwork on the walls. The name Sweet Victory reflected both my love of baking and my satisfaction with overcoming my family's attempt to control my life. The bakery opened in September, 6 months after I won the lottery. My specialties were traditional American desserts, apple pie, chocolate chip cookies, lemon bars, and red velvet cake. I also offered custom cakes for special occasions and catering services for local events. Business grew steadily through word-of-mouth recommendations. Customers were drawn to the quality of my baked goods, but many also knew my story and admired how I had stood up to family members who tried to take advantage of me. Mrs. Rodriguez from the bank became a regular customer and eventually a close friend. She often brought co-workers for lunch meetings and recommended my catering services to other businesses. One of my most satisfying uses of the lottery money was establishing the Sarah Patterson Scholarship Fund for single mothers pursuing college degrees. I contributed $50,000 to create an endowment that would provide annual scholarships to women in situations similar to what I had experienced as a young mother. I also made a significant donation to the Legal Aid Society that had referred me to Liz Rodriguez. Their services help people who can't afford attorneys to fight against family members who try to exploit them financially. About 8 months after opening the bakery, I met Frank Morrison, a recently retired teacher who became a regular customer. He usually arrived around 10 o'clock for coffee and a blueberry muffin, and we gradually began having longer conversations about books, travel, and life experiences. Frank was a gentle, intelligent man who had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier. He understood the challenges of rebuilding life after losing a spouse, and he never made me feel like I needed to justify my independence or financial decisions. Our friendship slowly developed into something deeper. Frank respected my autonomy and never showed any interest in my money beyond wanting to pay his fair share when we went to dinner. He was genuinely proud of my success with the bakery and supportive of my decision to cut ties with Douglas and Patricia. For the first time since Robert died, I felt like I could trust someone completely. Frank never tried to manage my decisions or question my judgment. He celebrated my strengths instead of looking for weaknesses to exploit. As I reflect on this entire experience 2 years later, I realize that winning the lottery was both the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. The money gave me financial security and the freedom to pursue my dreams, but it also revealed the true character of people I thought I could trust. The most painful part wasn't the legal battle or the stress of fighting my siblings in court. The most painful part was realizing that Douglas and Patricia had never really seen me as a capable, intelligent adult. In their minds, I was someone who needed to be managed and controlled, especially when real money was involved. Their attempt to have me declared mentally incompetent wasn't just about greed, although greed was certainly a major factor. It was about their fundamental belief that I wasn't smart enough or strong enough to handle important decisions independently. The experience taught me that family relationships based on obligation and tradition aren't necessarily worth preserving when they become toxic or exploitative. Blood relationships don't automatically entitle people to respect or trust if their actions demonstrate that they don't deserve either. I learned to trust my instincts about people's motivations and to document important conversations when I sensed that someone might be planning to take advantage of me. The recording I made during that family meeting was the key evidence that saved my financial independence. Most importantly, I learned that I'm much stronger and more capable than I had ever believed. Before this experience, I might have been intimidated by legal challenges or family pressure. Now I know that I can stand up to anyone who tries to undermine my autonomy or exploit my vulnerabilities. The bakery continues to thrive, and I've expanded to offer baking classes for people who want to learn traditional techniques. Teaching others brings me tremendous satisfaction, and I've discovered that I have a talent for helping people build confidence in their abilities. Sarah graduated from college with honors and decided to pursue a master's degree in social work. She wants to help families resolve conflicts and protect vulnerable people from financial exploitation. I'm incredibly proud of her strength and compassion during our family crisis. Frank and I have been talking about marriage, but we're taking things slowly and making sure our relationship is built on mutual respect rather than convenience or financial considerations. He's proven over time that he values my independence and has no interest in controlling my decisions or my money. I still live in the same house where Robert and I raised Sarah, but I've made it truly mine by renovating the kitchen and adding a large garden where I grow herbs and vegetables for the bakery. It feels like a place of peace and security rather than just survival. Douglas and Patricia have never contacted me since the court decision. I occasionally hear news about them through mutual friends, but I feel no sadness or regret about their absence from my life. Some relationships aren't worth the effort required to maintain them. The money I won has been managed carefully and conservatively. I've never made any impulsive purchases or risky investments. The bakery generates enough income to cover my living expenses, so the lottery money continues to grow in safe, long-term investments that will provide security for the rest of my life. I think the most important lesson from this experience is that financial independence gives you the power to make choices based on your own values rather than other people's expectations or demands. Having my own money meant I could fight back when my family tried to exploit me, and it gave me the freedom to build relationships with people who respect my autonomy. Sometimes people ask me if I regret winning the lottery because of all the family drama it caused. My answer is always the same. The lottery didn't create the problems with Douglas and Patricia. It just revealed problems that already existed. If they had been genuinely loving siblings, they would have celebrated my good fortune instead of trying to exploit it. The money gave me the resources to discover who my real family is. Sarah stood by me when her uncle and aunt tried to have me declared crazy. Liz Rodriguez became a trusted advisor and friend. Frank offers companionship without trying to control my decisions. Mrs. Rodriguez and my bakery customers provide daily reminders that there are good people in the world who can be trusted. I've learned that building a chosen family of people who respect and support you is much more valuable than maintaining biological family relationships that are based on exploitation or obligation. Now, when I wake up each morning, I feel grateful for my independence, my successful business, my loving relationships, and my financial security. But I'm most grateful for the strength I discovered when I was forced to fight for my rights and my dignity. The girl who used to worry about every monthly bill and depend on others for major decisions has become a woman who owns her own business, makes her own choices, and stands up to anyone who tries to take advantage of her. Sometimes the greatest gift life can give you isn't the money you win, but the opportunity it provides to discover who you really are and who really deserves to be part of your journey. I found out I'm much stronger than I ever imagined, and I found out that the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who celebrate your strength instead of trying to exploit your vulnerabilities. Today, I'm living proof that you don't have to forgive people who try to harm you, and you don't have to maintain relationships with family members who treat you badly. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who don't value your worth. If you're dealing with family members who are trying to control your finances or question your decision-making abilities, I want you to know that you're stronger than you think. Trust your instincts. Document everything. And don't let anyone convince you that wanting to control your own life makes you selfish or ungrateful. Have you ever had family members question your judgment about money or major life decisions? What would you do if your own siblings tried to have you declared mentally incompetent to steal your assets? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, because I'd love to hear from people who understand how difficult these family situations can be. Don't forget to like this video if my story resonated with you, And please subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding your inner strength. Share this video with anyone who might need encouragement to stand up for themselves against manipulative family members. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that you have every right to protect yourself and your assets from people who want to exploit you, even when those people share your DNA. I wish you the courage to fight for your independence and the wisdom to surround yourself with people who celebrate your success instead of trying to steal it.